The night I returned from my delayed flight was heavy with exhaustion, and something else that unsettled me from the moment I unlocked the door. I stepped into what I expected to be the familiar warmth of home, yet immediately sensed an odd void. The hallway light, which Ellen never failed to leave on during my trips, was off. A tiny detail, perhaps, but it set my mind whirring. I fumbled for the switch. Darkness met my touch. "Great," I murmured as my bag thudded onto the floor, the sound echoing unnervingly in the silence that swallowed every corner of the house. "Ellen," I called, expecting her usual response, a cheerful greeting or even a complaint about my travel woes. But only quiet answered back. The living room, bathed in pale moonlight that illuminated drifting dust, seemed untouched by life. A magazine lay askew on the coffee table, something Ellen would have immediately corrected. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. I tried my phone. It went straight to voicemail. I rationalized it as a delay in her return, but an insistent chill told me otherwise. Wandering into the kitchen, I expected to see traces of her morning routine, a note on the counter, a freshly washed plate. Instead, I found an almost antiseptic stillness, an empty fruit bowl, stale air as if the windows hadn't been opened for days, and a garbage can with last week's mail undisturbed. A calendar on the fridge caught my eye. Ellen usually marked every important day, doctor appointments, dinner plans, even mundane reminders, but after the day of my departure, every square was blank. No cheerful scribbles, no hints of her schedule. It was as though time had frozen. I recalled her habit of always sending a quick message when she was away. Tonight, not a single text or call arrived, intensifying the dread pooling in my gut. Trepidation urged me upstairs. Each step seemed to echo my mounting anxiety until I reached our bedroom. The bed was made with military precision, yet small details betrayed neglect. A half-open drawer and an untouched glass on the bedside table, complete with a thin ring of condensation. Even the dust on the nightstand looked unusually thick. In the mirror, my own wide, troubled eyes stared back. I forced myself to breathe deeply. Logic insisted there was a simple explanation. Perhaps Ellen had had an emergency, or she was simply late. Still, every detail felt off. Then, a row of picture frames on the dresser caught my attention. One frame, normally housing our wedding photo, was conspicuously empty, a dusty outline where a treasured memory once hung. I knelt in disbelief, wondering if it had been misplaced. It made no sense. We never moved that frame. A faint residue on the dresser seemed almost deliberate, a silent message I couldn't decipher. My heart pounding, I stepped back into the living room and sank onto the couch. The silence was suddenly pierced by the vibration of my phone. With trembling fingers, I read a message from an unknown number. "I know why she's not there. Meet me at the old diner off Route 16 if you want answers." The words burned into my mind. Who was sending this? And how did they know Ellen was missing? As I sat frozen, a surge of adrenaline overtook me. My worst fears had only just begun to surface. I grabbed my keys and dashed out the door, determined to chase down this cryptic clue, even if it meant confronting a truth I wasn't ready to face. That night, in the dark uncertainty and the echo of that mysterious text, everything changed. The road stretched endlessly before me, illuminated only by the stark glow of my headlights cutting through the inky darkness. The old diner off Route 16 was a relic from another time, its neon sign flickering like a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, gravel crunching beneath my tires. The place was locked up, its windows dark. No sign of life, no mysterious informant waiting to unveil the truth about Ellen. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. What kind of sick joke was this? Who would send a message like that, knowing full well how desperate I was for answers? My mind raced with possibilities. Was it someone who knew Ellen? Someone she had been seeing? My stomach churned at the thought, a mix of fury and devastation battling for dominance. I waited for an hour, then another, my patience thinning with each passing minute. No one came. No second message followed. I was alone with my thoughts, and they weren't doing me any favors. By the time the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. I had wasted an entire night chasing a ghost. Frustrated and hollow, I drove home, my pulse hammering with unanswered questions. I made a mental list of my next moves. I'd call her family, her friends, anyone who might know where she was. If that didn't yield results, I'd consider the police, though a part of me hesitated. Ellen was an adult. She had the right to leave if she wanted to. But why vanish without a trace? I had barely stepped inside when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. I turned, heart hammering. And then, as if nothing had happened, Ellen stepped through the doorway. She looked the same, yet different. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her expression unreadable. She carried no luggage, no sign that she had been anywhere far. Just her, standing there like she hadn't been gone for days. My relief was instant, but so was the surge of anger. I didn't know whether to hug her or scream. "Where the hell have you been?" I demanded. My voice came out rough, raw from the sleepless night. Ellen barely glanced at me as she set her keys on the entryway table. "I needed some time," she said simply, as if that were enough. "Time?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Time for what, exactly? Do you have any idea what I've been going through? You disappeared, Ellen. No calls, no messages, nothing." She flinched but kept her composure, her arms crossing over her chest. "I don't want to fight, Doug." "Then explain," I snapped. "Tell me where you were, who you were with." Her gaze finally met mine, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Fear, maybe even guilt. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "I'm not ready to talk about it," she said. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity of that statement. She wasn't ready? After everything she'd put me through, she still thought she could keep me in the dark? The house, once filled with memories of warmth and love, now felt like a battleground. Ellen brushed past me, heading upstairs without another word, leaving me standing there, breathless with frustration. I wanted to press her for answers, to demand the truth, but something in her demeanor warned me against it. Instead, I decided to take matters into my own hands. That night, after she went to bed, I searched through her things. I felt like an intruder in my own home, but I had no other choice. I needed to know. At first, I found nothing unusual. Then, tucked away inside her desk drawer, I discovered a small notebook filled with hurried scribbles. Dates. Initials. Strange notations I couldn't decipher. My pulse spiked. Many of these dates aligned with nights she had been working late or out with friends. I flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of the coded messages. But before I could process it, I heard a sound behind me. The study door creaked open. Ellen stood in the doorway, her eyes darting from me to the notebook in my hands. "Doug," she said, her voice tight with something close to panic. "What are you doing?" I held up the notebook. "Looking for answers. Care to explain what this is?" Her face paled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a quiet, almost desperate voice, she whispered, "You shouldn't have found that." The air between us was thick, charged with tension. My grip on the notebook tightened. "What does that mean?" I asked. My voice was steady, but inside, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff. "Are you going to tell me the truth, or am I going to have to keep digging?" Ellen took a slow step forward, her expression unreadable. "You don't want the truth, Doug," she murmured. "Trust me." A chill ran down my spine. "Too late," I said. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling shakily. When she opened them again, there was something haunting in her gaze. "If you keep digging," she warned, "you'll wish you hadn't." In the days that followed, the oppressive silence between us gave way to a confrontation I never thought I'd have to face. I found myself standing in our living room, A room that once resonated with laughter and shared secrets, but now felt cold and unyielding. Ellen sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes downcast as if avoiding the painful truth. The atmosphere was electric with unsaid words. I knew that what needed to happen was inevitable. "You're not leaving this room until you tell me what's going on," I said, pacing slowly before her. Every step echoed my heart's relentless throb, a mix of anger, despair, and the desperate hope for honesty. Ellen's face was etched with hesitation. Her hands trembled as they rested on her knees. Though she wore the same clothes as that morning, something in her expression had shifted, as if she were no longer the woman I once knew. After a long, heavy pause, she spoke. "Doug, I can't say everything right now," her voice barely rising above a whisper. Her words, half-formed and trembling, made it clear that she was wrestling with something far beyond a simple misstep. I couldn't help but press on. "Then start talking," I urged, my tone harsh with betrayal. "Explain the absences, the hidden notes, the photos I received. Who is that person in the picture, and why have you been hiding so much from me?" My eyes searched hers, demanding an answer, any answer. Ellen's gaze faltered. "It's not just about me," she managed, her voice cracking under the weight of her secret. "There are others involved, complex matters I've tried to keep away from you." The revelation cut through the air like shattered glass, each word exposing the raw wound of infidelity and deception that lay between us. I felt my pulse surge as memories of her secret meetings and mysterious disappearances flooded back. "Others," I repeated, voice laced with incredulity. "You've been lying to me for months, and now you say it involves someone else too? How do you expect me to understand any of this?" Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to continue. "I never intended for things to go this far. I was scared, Doug. Scared of losing myself, of the consequences. I tried to control it, but then it just spiraled." Her confession trailed off into a heavy silence, leaving a chasm of unspoken hurt. Anger mingled with sorrow as I processed her words. "So what now?" I demanded, my voice trembling between fury and despair. "Do you expect me to simply accept that our life together was built on a foundation of lies? How can I trust anything after this?" Her expression turned desperate, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I had once loved, a woman whose laughter filled our home. But that moment was fleeting. "I'm sorry, Doug," she said, her voice barely audible, as if each syllable was an admission of guilt. "I never meant to hurt you. I couldn't face the truth, and now everything is falling apart." The room seemed to close in around us as the weight of our shattered trust pressed down. I struggled to find words that could encapsulate the betrayal I felt, words that could capture the pain of realizing that everything I had believed in was nothing more than an illusion. "You need to leave," I finally managed, the words sounding foreign even as they left my lips. "I can't be here with you while I'm drowning in questions I can't answer." Ellen's eyes widened, a silent plea for understanding mingling with regret. "Doug, please," she began, but I cut her off, unable to bear another moment of false hope. "No more excuses, Ellen. I need the truth, and until I get it, I can't let you stay." There was a long, unbearable pause as she gathered her few belongings. With each step she took toward the door, I felt the finality of our unraveling lives. The tension between us was palpable, charged with the sorrow of what had been lost and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. As she reached the threshold, she looked back with eyes that were filled with both sorrow and a plea for forgiveness, a look that would haunt me in the quiet moments after she was gone. Her departure left a hollow silence, a quiet that was almost louder than the words we had exchanged. Standing alone in the living room, I felt a strange mix of devastation and relief. The confrontation, painful as it was, had forced a truth into the open, a truth that was too bitter to ignore. I knew that beyond this moment lay an uncertain future, one that would force me to piece together a life from the shards of our broken trust. As I sat down, the silence enveloped me like a heavy shroud, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice. The thought that Ellen might one day return or explain everything fully was both a hope and a curse. In that solitary moment, with the remnants of our shared life scattered around me, I resolved that the answers I sought would not come from her, but from the inevitable journey ahead, a journey where I would have to learn to rebuild, to forgive, and perhaps, eventually, to move on. After Ellen's abrupt exit, an oppressive silence settled over the house, a silence so dense it seemed to press against every surface. I sank onto the couch we had once chosen together, feeling the weight of every unresolved argument and every hidden secret. The living room, once a sanctuary of warmth and shared laughter, now felt cavernous and empty. Each object, each familiar corner, mocked me with memories of a life that was rapidly disintegrating. I sat motionless for what felt like an eternity, my mind replaying the confrontation over and over. Ellen's confession, her desperate yet vague attempts at explanation, and that final moment when I had told her to leave, it all swirled around me in a painful haze. I could still recall the way her eyes had clouded with fear and regret, how her trembling hands had clutched at the fabric of her clothes as if trying to hold onto something that was slipping away. Unable to remain stagnant in the heavy silence any longer, I slowly rose and made my way to the kitchen. The remnants of our routine, the untouched coffee mugs on the table, the breakfast dishes still in the sink, served as stark reminders of the normalcy we once shared. The very air in the kitchen felt charged with memories. Our casual banter over morning coffee, the comforting ritual of preparing meals together, and the unspoken understanding that every day would unfold as it always had. Now, all of it was tainted by betrayal and the raw sting of loss. In an attempt to distract myself, I wandered into the bedroom, a space that now felt more like a museum of happier times than a private retreat. The bed, meticulously made as if awaiting a peaceful slumber, stood in cruel contrast to the turmoil in my heart. The dresser, once a repository of cherished photographs and mementos, bore the empty outline of our missing wedding photo. That vacant space seemed to symbolize the gap that had formed between us, a chasm that might never be bridged. Driven by a restless need for answers, I retraced my steps to the study where I had earlier discovered the notebook filled with Ellen's secret scribbles. Sitting in the cold glare of the overhead light, I stared at the chaotic scrawl of dates, initials, and indecipherable notes. Each mark confirmed my deepest suspicions, deepening the wound that had begun with her unexplained disappearances. I couldn't help but feel that the notebook was a testament to a hidden life, one that Ellen had constructed piece by piece behind my back. As evening crept in, the house transformed once more. Shadows lengthened and the soft hum of the outside world seeped in through half-drawn curtains. I found myself perched by the window, watching as the streetlights flickered to life, each beam a reminder of the normalcy I desperately craved. The quiet was both a comfort and a curse, offering a brief respite from the clamor of my thoughts while simultaneously amplifying the echoes of my solitude. Just as I began to contemplate reaching out, to call a friend or even consider speaking with Ellen again, a sudden vibration from my phone jolted me. A new message appeared on the screen, and my heart sank as I read its contents. It was a terse note from someone I didn't recognize, warning me to stop digging into the past if I valued my own safety. The message was chilling in its simplicity, a stark reminder that there were forces at play far beyond the betrayal I was grappling with. That single text message sent a fresh wave of dread crashing over me. The thought that Ellen's infidelity might be just the surface of a far more perilous truth was unbearable. Had I unwittingly stepped into a labyrinth of secrets and lies that reached much deeper than our failing marriage? My mind raced with dark possibilities as I tried to reconcile the threat with the bitter reality of our disintegrating relationship. Exhausted yet unable to find any comfort, I retreated to the living room once again. I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of what once was our life, and allowed myself a moment of raw vulnerability. The pain was palpable, a heavy companion in the dim light of dusk. In that quiet solitude, I realized that the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The betrayal had not only shattered my trust but also left me questioning every facet of our shared existence. With a deep, shuddering breath, I acknowledged that nothing would ever be the same. The safety of the known had crumbled, replaced by a terrifying need to confront uncomfortable truths. And so, as the night deepened around me, I resolved to face whatever lay ahead, even if it meant enduring further heartbreak or unearthing secrets I wished had remained buried. The finality of my decision hit me as I stepped out of the lawyer's office. In my hand lay a neat folder containing the divorce papers, each document a silent testament to the end of what once was. For the first time in weeks, a strange calm replaced the tumult of doubt and anguish. Just yesterday, I had been haunted by questions. Was I acting too hastily? Could there still be a chance to salvage what Ellen and I once shared? But amidst the polished floors of the courthouse lobby, clarity emerged. My marriage was over, and although a bittersweet sadness lingered, it also felt as if a door had swung open toward a future I never imagined facing alone. I stepped onto the busy sidewalk, merging with a stream of strangers who hurried to their destinations. The day was crisp, the sky a pale blue, softly dappled with drifting clouds. My phone buzzed unexpectedly in my pocket, and for a moment I hesitated, half expecting another ominous message from that mysterious sender. Instead, I saw the name Andrew flash on the screen, an old college friend whose voice, even in text, carried reassurance. Relief washed over me as I recalled our recent, casual exchanges, his concern gently masked in brief greetings. Perhaps I was finally ready for real conversation. "Hey, Doug," he said the moment I answered. "I know this is last minute, but I'm in town for a couple of days. Want to grab a coffee?" His tone was light, yet laden with genuine care. I glanced at the folder still clutched in my hand, feeling its weight not just as a symbol of loss but also of liberation. "Sure," I replied. "I could use a break. Let's meet at that cafe near the park, the one we used to frequent after finals, remember?" His chuckle was a comforting echo of simpler times. Sliding into the chair opposite me, he extended his arm for a quick handshake. "Man, it's been ages," he remarked. "I've got to say, you're holding up, though you looked a lot better back in college." I managed a half smile. "I've felt better, too." Andrew's eyes, full of quiet understanding, searched mine. "So, do you want to talk about what happened, or are we going to skirt around it?" I exhaled slowly, leaning forward. No point hiding it anymore. I recounted the whirlwind of recent weeks, the unexplained disappearance, the cryptic texts, the agonizing confrontation, and finally, my decision to file for divorce. As I spoke, I realized my hands were trembling ever so slightly, as though I were reliving every raw moment. "Doug," Andrew said softly, reaching across the table to rest a reassuring hand on my forearm. "I'm sorry. I can't imagine how painful this must be for you." I shrugged, blinking away the sting of fresh wounds. "I didn't see it coming. Or maybe I did, but I chose to ignore the signs. Either way, the result is the same." He nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of his coffee. Sometimes an ending can be the beginning of something new, even if it doesn't seem that way right now. In that quiet moment, I recognized a spark of hope, a fragile light amid the darkness. Over the following days, I tried to take Andrew's words to heart. I focused on the practical steps needed to reclaim my life, reconnecting with old friends, accepting invitations to dinners and game nights, and gradually allowing myself to breathe beyond the confines of heartbreak. Each conversation, no matter how fleeting, offered a glimpse of a future unburdened by Ellen's lies. One evening, Andrew dropped by my place with a pizza and his signature grin. "Thought you could use some company," he said, holding the warm box like a small beacon of normalcy. "Mind if I hang out?" I returned a genuine smile for the first time in a long while. "Sure. Excuse the mess." He looked around, noting the changes, a fresh coat of pale gray on the living room walls, rearranged furniture, new books filling the shelves. "Starting over, huh?" "Yeah," I replied, the casual tone belying the weight of the decision. "I figured if I'm beginning again, the house should reflect that." As we ate, I confided my plans to revisit an old hobby, writing short stories. In college, I'd poured my thoughts into drafts that, at one point, even garnered a bit of recognition online. Now, with the painful past behind me, The idea of creating something entirely my own sparked a tentative excitement. "You've got talent, Doug," Andrew encouraged warmly. "Maybe it's time to let that spark shine again." In the weeks that followed, the divorce proceedings advanced steadily. Papers were signed, assets were negotiated, and every signature felt like another step away from betrayal. A slow yet liberating reclaiming of control over my future. I immersed myself in home projects, repainting rooms, decluttering memories that were too painful to bear, and reshuffling furniture to forge a space that was unequivocally mine. Of course, not every day was easy. Some nights, memories of happier times surfaced unbidden, a scroll through old photos, the echo of laughter once shared. In those moments, anger and regret would mingle, but I clung to simple routines. Tending to my plants, reading a few pages of a novel before sleep, jotting down ideas in a battered notebook. These small acts became my anchors, preventing me from drifting too far into despair. One afternoon, I converted a corner of the guest room into a makeshift writing nook. Natural light spilled through the window, illuminating my favorite books and a blank page waiting to be filled. As I put pen to paper, the words, halting at first, soon flowed into a quiet, liberating narrative. I felt a piece of my identity re-emerge, not defined by the shattered remnants of a failed marriage but by my own resilience and creativity. That evening, Andrew called again. "Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up?" I paused in my desk chair, looking at the scattered pages around me. "Better," I admitted softly, surprised by the truth of it. "Not perfect, but better." "Progress, then," he said with a gentle laugh. "Listen, a few friends and I are planning a hike on Saturday. Fresh air, good company, no drama. You in?" After a moment's thought, I agreed. "Count me in." His words, and the steady rhythm of a life slowly reassembling, offered a quiet assurance. I was alive, and I was beginning to live again. As I stepped out of the courthouse one final time, divorce finalized and a new chapter beckoning, I caught my reflection in a shop window. The tired eyes staring back held a new-found steadiness, a subtle resolve. I no longer had to fear betrayal lurking in the shadows. Instead, I had the promise of a future shaped entirely by my own hands. That evening, as I stood by the window in my guest room-turned-writing office, I penned the final words of a new story, a story that was mine alone. A small, hopeful smile played on my lips as I looked up at the emerging stars. Life would go on, challenges would come, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to meet them head-on. A new beginning had arrived, and I was prepared to write it on my own terms.